Hello, welcome everybody to the first meeting of the Just Transitions Climate Subcommittee meeting of the Climate Council in 2025. It's January 16th. Good to see you all here. So as we start, I was just going to, we did establish we have a quorum, so that's great. I was going to walk through the agenda real quick. Um, and maybe what I'll do is I'll just do a quick screen share so we can see it. All right, so you can all see my screen. We haven't had a quorum for a while, which is why we're excited to have one. So we have several different groups of minutes to approve. And I did just drop all the links in the chat. They're also linked in our agenda. Can someone drop the agenda link in the chat also? That'd be a help. Um, so if you were at those meetings and can review them so we can approve them, that's great. If you weren't there, you should good to review them anyway, so you know what happened. So in a moment, we'll go through those. We'll give a little bit of time for folks to look at them so that we've had a chance to make sure there aren't any errors or omissions, and then we can approve that. Then we're going to get an update from the Climate Action Office. So Sophie and Liz are going to give us some updates. And then at the end of that time, we'll also hope to hear from our liaisons to other subcommittees to see if they have anything to share about their experiences and anything that they think would be helpful for us. And then we're going to go through and talk about the chapter that we're developing for the revised climate action plan, looking at the overall timeline and what, when we're expected to have pieces in place for a draft for public review and all that kind of thing. And then, so we have a nice draft. We have an outline and then some initial draft chapters that we can go through. So that'll be like the bulk of our meeting. Take some public comment and then talk about our next steps. So, any questions about the agenda? That all sounds good. I'm going to drop my screen share. Um, if folks want to look through those minutes, we'll start with the oldest one, but let's just like take, unless people are like, oh, I've read them all, I know them by heart, we can say any edits. But I think it would be good since there are so many of them if we gave about 5 minutes at least to just look at them. Maybe it doesn't have to be a full 5 minutes, but if folks want to just take a moment, read through them, just get caught up on what we've been doing, that'd be great. So I'm going to put myself on mute and we'll read for a few minutes and then come back. Sound good? How are things coming along? I still see some reading faces. We can take another minute or two. Anybody desperately want more time, or you good for now? There's one thing I noticed, and then I'll see if anyone else noticed anything. There was a meeting that I wasn't able to attend. It was the one, I think it was the October meeting. And it said Abby did the introduction, but she said it wasn't one of the attendees. Were you also not able to make it, Abby? I can't remember. Or did we miss your name?
October, I was there. I was not there for the November or the December meetings.
Okay, unless I'm going blind, you're not listed as one of the attendees in October, but that was the only thing I noticed that seemed like an omission. Did anyone else notice anything that needs to be corrected or added or changed in these minutes? And of course, if you weren't at the meeting, that's why we take minutes, but no need to comment. Right. If I'm not hearing any problems with them or any concerns, then let's, other than one thing saying Abby was there, then let's accept these minutes as approved and move on to our next thing in our agenda. So, Sophie and Liz, I'm handing it over to you.
Thanks, Kelly. I can kick us off. Liz and I are going to give a little update of things happening in the Climate Action Office, and because Liz is so embedded in the Climate Council process, she'll maybe share a little bit about there's a recent Climate Council meeting and the public comment guidance that you all had originally drafted and was put forward to the subcommittees for this past fall. Oh, good question from Abby in the chat. Do we have somebody who volunteered to take minutes? I'm happy to do that because I think I'm actually the only staff person. So why don't I do that? You, Abby.
Big speaking role right now, though. Can someone like cover?
Yeah. Making sure I don't forget. I'll let Liz speak more to the council and the public comment guidance that they adopted, but I'll kick us off by sharing that the Climate Action Office is supporting the Climate Action Plan design and copy editing, and we're working on getting a contract nailed down with a contractor called the Image Farm, who's going to help us with graphic design, copy editing, including for plain language. And then an additional component of the project is we're going to be able to have them write some stories and get some photography. And that's great because they'll be, useful more broadly than the Climate Action Plan. So I always love when there's like a dual purpose. And, the stories could be pulled out of the plan to be used on their own. Similarly, the photos can be used for other Climate Action Office work. And I think it would be cool. I apologize. I didn't get this on the agenda in advance. I don't know if we have time, but I'd be happy to share with you all like our brainstorming about the kinds of stories that might be possible to tell. We kind of want to make a big list and then narrow it down based on what's possible, and also getting kind of a broad representation of a subject matter and geographic diversity represented in the stories. So I think that could be a really helpful thing to have Just Transition Subcommittee input on. With like brainstorming broadly, I think the more minds, the merrier. And we want to make sure that there is an equity and justice component to at least some of the stories. Yeah, and it doesn't have to, I'll just name, before I pass it over to you, Kelly, that these stories don't have to be about state government. It's trying to tell the story more broadly of climate action in Vermont. So happy to go into more detail and to share our ideas and get input and feedback on that at some point, but we don't have to do that now.
Well, that's actually exactly what I was going to ask, because I wanted like to a clarifying thing. Like, what kind of stories are they? Fictional? Are they real stories? Are they weaving together multiple stories we heard in our public engagement? What are you? So I mean, I'm really intrigued, and I think it would be helpful to hear what the current vision is and be able to provide a little input. If it's like, if you can do like a little bit more specific now, and then we can decide if we have time to
Yeah,
dig in deeper or plan that for our next meeting.
yeah. Great question, Kelly. I wonder if it would be helpful for me to share my screen with kind of where our brainstorm currently is at. Does that sound supportive of describing this? And definitely factual stories. Good clarification.
That was my guess, but in the name of plain language, not all stories are truthful. We love fictional stories in our family.
If we could do fictional stories, then climate change would be solved tomorrow. Bam. So the goal here is to feature different examples of climate action that's taking place across Vermont at different scales by different actors, entities. That could be a person, a business, a school, a neighborhood, a municipality, a program. We do have like some state government programs in here. The feature was more so like from the perspective of somebody who's used that program. And I'm thinking of the goal as just possible and showing what some of the successes are in climate action, but not sugarcoating what needs to be done, and using those successes to say, and still, here's how much more we need to do, or here are some of the barriers for this being, implemented at a larger scale or for more people. That's kind of how we frame the goal. We want to have representation across topic areas. We want to have representation, at different scales, small scale and large, and then make sure we have some geographic diversity. So this is kind of my like big brainstorm, and then by looking at making sure we have representation across these things is how we'll kind of narrow it down. So thinking about, stories about transportation, stories about buildings efficiency and fuel switching, maybe a story about a community solar project. Don't have many good ideas for waste yet. Actually, Liz, I was thinking of picking your brain on that one. A lot of ideas around ecosystems, which a lot of these, I have these buckets just to make sure we have representation, but I'll also name that like a lot of these intersect. So we talked about ecosystems, floodplain restoration, human flood component to that too. So a lot of these have like overlap between the different things. Climate smart agriculture, and forests, how climate change affects health and how we can prepare for that. I'll stop there to not take up a crazy amount of time, but hopefully that's helpful to kind of give a sense of the scope.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I just dropped it in the chat, but I may have some ideas about the waste and wastewater thing. People doing innovative things and people struggling because they can't be permitted to do innovative things. So I have some tie-ins there. Matthew, go ahead.
How about stories and barriers about tools and limited resources that towns, have to, comply with, or have resources about that, because, most of this, requires, they say, grant writing processes and grants, but you can't fix it if you don't have the money, if you know what I mean. How about barriers to municipals, that, don't even have that type of money, is that barriers, it's like, there's no money in the pot, so your town literally has nothing to do, can't do much of anything because it's that there's no money there to begin with. And most towns, that are, outside, and this is what not to get off into a rabbit hole, what Doug Hoffer says, the state, attorney, treasurer, you name him, he says that the last year, most of the big downtowns gobbled up all those resources that really didn't need those resources that could have been, dispersed for like rural towns that really needed it. And from what he said, it was a shame because there's rural towns outside the ones that can afford it, that really really didn't have anything, in a pot to begin with. So they need a road. Unfortunately, they're out of luck. And that's what I'm talking about as those type of barriers. Is not just limited resources and tools and grant writing, is stories of municipals that are outside the ones that can, offer more, that they're hurting for someone to stand up for them. And that's what makes Vermont as a whole community. But like I said, if we're not all participating, or not all towns are participating in this, vitalization of economics, not just economic, but economy, environment, advancements, then we still lose. It still becomes a zero at the end because not everybody's on the same, level, as, frequently grants, or given the chance to upgrade their towns. And usually they get missed in the big lots of things, unfortunately don't get seen. It's the unseens that usually need the help the most, It's a seen, the ones that are seen, they get the most of the grants, It's like, we'll just say Montpelier and Burlington. They're seen, but everybody else takes a back seat. So if you look at that way, the way I look at it is, that's the reason why Vermont's not growing or bringing that, economic back in, because most of these towns are not up to par as the rest of the state should be, compared to Burlington and Montpelier. If the rest of the state was up to like Burlington and Montpelier status, we could have a chance, But like I said, it becomes, very, very, I should say, very, very limited in the process in itself, because it's like towns are trying their best to survive, and they need help from bigger towns that could provide that extra relief and finance, to make sure that they're bringing the equity side of the lens of this, make sure that everybody has that, chance, But, it's just, something I want to bring up. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Matthew. And I see parallels in all different areas, because I remember, so I come from this small business background. I remember when there were grants for small businesses for COVID relief, and they had some that were earmarked for women business owners and BIPOC business owners. And they had trouble reaching the BIPOC businesses because they didn't have an organization. And the women business owners basically, like, they all got in there, got their, and it wasn't like it was easy. There were a lot of people who struggled to get their financials in order. And so again, the most privileged women-owned businesses probably got in there first. And then it was like, how do we reach the BIPOC businesses, and how do we make sure that they know how to apply and all of this? Like, there was no network there. And that's changed since then, which is awesome. There's a really cool business organization that's helping to knit together this diverse group of BIPOC-owned businesses. But the same thing also happens with individuals. When there's a resource available, the people who already have more privilege, who may still benefit from that resource, they may not have a lot of pocket money to spend on anything. If there's a disaster, they still need help. But the people who need the most help don't even necessarily know about the resource, and they don't necessarily know how to apply for it. And by the time they get there, the people who were first off the mark, they've already taken all the resources. And that's a common theme throughout all levels of, so municipal government, businesses, individuals. I see it all over the place. And it's a really important equity thing that we see it play out on all levels. When there's a limited amount of funds, the people who have their paperwork in order and are connected to the channels to know exactly when the the starting gun goes off to go get those funds, they're first out the gate and they're first to get the money. And anyone who's not just tuned into that and ready to go isn't going to get it. And it's really a really tough thing with equity because yeah. Anyway, so thank you for bringing that up. I think that's really important. And I think that's why, as we're talking about this, maybe this is something also that our subcommittee has seen this and can say, hey, you think this is going to be really easy and everyone can apply to get this or this, kind of loan or whatever, but that may not be so easy. And so shedding light on that from our experiences might be helpful in our liaison roles and as our subcommittee is reviewing some of the other work where some of the folks who are coming up with really cool policies may not fully have experienced those things that people who are in more rural communities or less privileged communities, then we see these things and we see how first off the mark gobbles up all the money, even if they need it. Right? There's just a limited resource, and trying to help the most impacted first is part of one of our values here that we're trying to help. So anyway, thank you. That was good timing because I don't often think about the municipalities being later. I think about the people and the businesses, and I really appreciate your sort of regional municipality view, Matthew. Oh, Mona, welcome.
Hello, how are you?
So glad you could join us.
Oh, thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy
It's
New
almost,
Year.
Oh, January almost gone, but we didn't meet until now.
I'm glad you're here. To catch you up real quick, we reviewed the minutes from the last several meetings. If you do notice any problems with them, please let us know, but they were approved by the quorum we had. And then we were just getting an update from Sophie, and then I think we'll get an update from Liz from the Climate Action Office. Sophie was talking about working with a contractor who will help to write stories that we hear from different people across different areas in climate action, different experiences, like true life stories from people, organizations, maybe municipalities, and across a really broad variety of areas. So it's really cool. And Sophie, I don't know, that's probably not like a share it right now kind of document, but if you wanted to drop sort of the list of things that you were considering as your spectrum, I think that'd be something if you wanted to share it after the meeting, that'd be super helpful. So anyway, so we're talking about some nice.
And where is he gonna publish this? Where is it on the website only, or?
So in the goal is to have stories that are in the climate action plan document, but also these are things that could be pulled out and used by themselves. So they're going to be shorter in plain language, and it's a real story about something that happened to somebody or an organization and what they experienced. And so it should be hopefully really engaging for people to understand what progress we've made and where we still need to do some work and things like that. So anyway, I don't want to go too much into that, but I wanted to give you a quick sense of where we are.
Beautiful, thank you.
And then Sophie, did you want to hand it over to Liz now? Did other people have feedback on the stories? I think that was probably enough for now, and I'd love to dig in deeper another time so we don't get too far behind our agenda. That sounds good.
Okay, great. Well, I'll cover the public comment process piece first, then we can talk about the drafting of the chapters. But we've started with Sophie at the last council meeting, incorporating the public comment that we've received online to the council, reading that out loud to the council members at the beginning of each council meeting. And so that way, even if it's like a ton of comments like we did in the last meeting, maybe we'll summarize some pieces of it, but so that folks have the opportunity to hear comments that were submitted to the council online. And then that's in addition to the normal kind of public comment pieces that we have throughout meetings. Sophie, do you have anything you want to add about that process?
Yeah, that, and apologies if you said this also, but that we'll email when Liz sends out the meeting materials in advance. Those public comments will be shared. So ideally, the council members should be reading through those public comments before the meeting. And then there's, multiple venues. I feel like there were a couple other pieces of the guidance that are a little bit different, but it's very similar to the one that you all put forward for the subcommittees. The council did deliberate and talk about it, and then it was adapted based on their feedback of what would work best for them in their upcoming process. So it is slightly different. And that you can find that document on the most recent council meeting. And I should also put that on our resources page. I'm now thinking.
Awesome. And then the next update is just that we're moving to the phase of the council really focusing on they're about to be receiving all of the recommendations from the subcommittees and then moving to the drafting of the chapters and also reviewing the recommendations they received from the subcommittees. So I forget, I'm sorry, I've shared this in so many different meetings. Have I shared the document with you all with the chapters and the due dates and who's leading what yet? Maybe.
Yes, I think
I
we
could share
have, but go ahead and share it.
I
just to
could
make
share it
sure
again.
we're-
Yeah.
Make
Okay.
sure we're talking about the same version or something.
Great.
Yeah, I
Let me
think the one
just-
that Abby shared by email was slightly out of date to the most current one that we saw from
Okay.
the council meeting on Monday. So,
Yeah, let me share that now then.
and I'm gonna drop the link to the public comment guidance that the council adopted.
Okay, so can folks see my screen? Okay, awesome.
Yes.
So you'll see here this outlines the chapters, who's responsible for leading the chapters, and the due date of when to submit each chapter by. And there are various sections. Kelly, I'm not sure if you've received my messages, but where we'll have public engagement, Sophie and potentially Kelly, and then other sections as well for just transition. So this chapter, building equity into the CAP and ensuring a just transition. So it lists Kelly, but you would all be involved. And I think by emails you're already kind of starting that process I've seen, but kind of coordinating, let's start working on this chapter. So it's not just Kelly, but reaching out to maybe the whole subcommittee or certain folks to write that collectively.
Yeah, we've been working on that already, and I
Okay.
hate to see my name there because I've been doing almost nothing. So
It's having a counselor from that subcommittee lead the charge,
Yeah.
but
And
so
since I'm the
are you
only one, I get it.
but yeah, so are you good with having your name there? I can unitalicize you. Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with it. At all, and put at all first and then Kelly after, but sure, yes.
Okay, and then there is another one. I thought there was another just transitions. Climate stories. Did I pass it? That was it. But yeah, so that's the idea, is just that this is the outline of the different chapters. Are there any questions about this process? Where the council's moving on this? But that's really going to be the focus moving forward, is reviewing all these recommendations and starting to build out these chapters going forward.
And so I don't know, sorry if I was grabbing water. The March 1st date is when we are aiming to have something that can sort of then go into a public review process. So it's not finalized, but it is a good enough draft that we can take public comment on it.
Right.
So our
because that's all gonna
yeah, but then the public engagement thing isn't going to be until June because there'll be more public engagement, right? So that's why
I thought that is it April? It's June? That was April.
The public engagement, the date on the right hand column there.
Oh, sorry, I thought you meant okay. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, the public engagement chapter.
I thought you meant public engagement in action. Yes.
No. Yeah,
yes, that's correct.
Committee has a big role in the building equity into the climate action plan and ensuring a just transition. And we've already been working on drafting that. And the hope is that we have something by March 1st that we can. So I think, let's see, the Climate Council is meeting in March to go over these, right? And then public engagement will start in April. Is that right, Liz and Sophie?
Yeah.
And we have a meeting that is hopefully going to be mostly in person in March.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Right? I can't remember what the date is. So if anyone on this subcommittee wants to and can attend in person, that's great. If you can't or don't want to, you can also attend virtually, or you can watch it afterwards or not, you know. So anyways, but it's open to everybody to attend, and either in person or online. But they're encouraging for one meeting later this month that all climate council members meet in person, and it'll probably be in the Montpelier area. And then there's the one in March, again, encouraging all climate councilors to meet in person if possible, and welcoming members of the public, subcommittee members, anyone who wants to be there to join in those. And yes, and Matthew was concerned, I think, that we were like saying it was only going to be in person, which is not fun for those of us who live up in very remote areas and we don't want to go to Montpelier in the snow. But having that hybrid option is always nice. And there was talk also, somebody at the climate council meeting was like, what if we have a snow date? Would that be okay? Which would be nice, but Liz will decide if that's, you know, feasible. That's a logistics thing that's a little tricky. But so anyway, those are sort of the big, so the big in-person one will be sort of hashing out a lot of these things and getting more in the like working through these chapters together. So I'll be able to bring what we talk about today to our in-person big meeting. It's gonna be a long day later this month, and maybe get feedback on that, but also as an opportunity to hear what other people are working on for their chapters and provide feedback. And then again in March, after the chapters are more fleshed out and more fully crafted, before they go in for another round of public comment and all of that. Did I sum that up in a decent way?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. I think the 27th, it's going to focus a lot. They're just looking at an enormous amount of recommendations from the drafting subcommittees too. So yeah, getting through that all will be a long day, but it'll be good. No, but that all sounds good. Any other questions on council process, where we're at? Well, I'll stop sharing.
All right, thank you. Were there other, we're a little bit behind our time, so I didn't want to push it, but I think it was helpful, especially going through some of Sophie's ideas. That was helpful, and getting a sense of where we stand. Any other updates from the Climate Action Office, Liz or Sophie? Seem like the big one. And then remind me, I always forget who is a liaison, and Danielle, you have every excuse not to have been to any meetings. Abby, Danielle, gosh, I should know this by now. So Danielle, do you want to go first? Have you been to any of the subcommittee meetings?
Not in December. I hadn't. Yeah, I was a little busy. But I did send my thoughts on things out to the different task groups via email. I don't know what they discussed at the last meeting. I think I missed one or two, but there is one coming up, so I'll get an update then. But yeah, not sorry, but haven't been there.
Awesome. Mona, I don't know if you heard, but Danielle had her baby daughter. Right? What's her name?
Malia.
Congratulations.
I didn't know that either, Danielle. This is what happens when I was gone and missed 2 meetings. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Sounds like Danielle and Malia are both doing really well. Wonderful.
Yes, we are. And she has a 12-year-old sister who is beyond excited. So it's great.
My gosh. That's amazing. That's so
Great.
Cool.
You have a helper at home. That's good.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I'm not worried that the 12-year-old is gonna somehow like forget try to jump over the baby like my daughter did. she was only 4 and I'm gonna jump over the baby. It's like, ah!
Yeah, a little different.
She was a devoted older sister, but questionable decision-making skills at the age of 4. So wonderful. Oh yeah, no, that's fine. And I have heard a couple updates, but I think that they're largely just really like heavy undrafting mode in most of these subcommittees. So, Abby, did you have any updates from Ag and Ecosystem, or have you also? I mean, you've also kind of been.
Yeah, it's
away.
been, yeah, but I have attended parts of the last few. So there was one just last week that I was able to attend, and I feel like I feel like Just Transition Subcommittee has some kindred folk on ag and ecosystem in some ways, of like really being thoughtful about language, even though I recognize and feel the tension of that being time consuming, to be thinking about what do we mean when we say working landscape? What do we mean when we say a farmer? Like, and it's hard. And like I can see and watch sort of like the dynamic and the paradigm really struggle of like wanting to stay on time, wanting to meet the deadlines, wanting to like be productive, but also, feeling and there being a push to really try to slow down and be clear with what we mean, and make sure that we're hearing one another. So there's a lot of that culture that already exists on ag and ecosystem. So I really have chosen not to, or haven't felt the need to say much, but more just to kind of listen and observe their process. And I would guess that it's emblematic in some ways of kind of this work overall, that, we have a sense of obligation to meet statutory expectations, and wanting to, and asking a lot of people to kind of revise strategies and pathways, and like being really engaged and having really thoughtful kind of effort spent there, and still recognizing that it may not be as inclusive or as clear as it was intended. But I think the subcommittee is really working through that, struggling through that, but as a result, working through that.
That, from what I was hearing in the council meeting on Monday, that definitely sounds like what the tone I was getting, and from reading their draft. And for those who might be interested, some of the initial primary, like the big top actions have been shared publicly. They're not finalized, obviously, and like vetted by the climate council to say like, are we on the right track? Anyone have strong objections to this thing? And so that was sort of what the big sharing of those was in December, and then the how are we doing temperature check was on Monday. So if you wanted to look through what the top actions are for any of the subcommittees that you know, if you're not a liaison, or for any of the ones you're not a liaison to, that there's those are available. And I don't know, Liz or Sophie might be able to drop those in the chat faster than I could, but or you can go and look at the documents from actually I don't know, you might be able to find it easier if you look. But I saw your comment, Danielle. It's like rural resilience. I got the same sense that there's like a really deep understanding of the equity issues in both of those subcommittees, and because they're not given a clear mandate of reducing emissions, which is what cross-sector mitigation's mandate is, and they know and they think about equity, but they don't necessarily have as much of an awareness of the equity piece, just because they're coming from a lot of them are coming from like a numbers and science kind of side. And it's nice because numbers are something you can work with easily. People, they're complicated. And natural systems, they're complicated. Livestock, my goats escape all the time. But I have well-trained goats. But yes, the fact that those two subcommittees are dealing with really complex systems, and the goal is to make them better, not to hit some sort of target number. And it's a tough place to be. And I'm really impressed with how they're doing this time around. I think last time when we first did our initial climate action plan, those two subcommittees were sort of like, I don't even know where to start. And I think ag and ecosystems especially, they had a lot of different amazing ideas, and they really couldn't figure out how to, and some people said we shouldn't, from what I hear. I wasn't on the subcommittee, but like, how do we narrow them down? And maybe we don't. And how do we prioritize? And maybe we don't. Maybe they're all important equally. And so there was a lot of, it seemed like it was a tough time. And I personally, from my little window, have been seeing some really awesome, strong things coming out that I'm really excited about. And another thing I'm excited about is that I'm seeing there's a couple of these sort of cross-cutting issues like public health and education and workforce development. And Liz or Sophie, there's like a third one. What's the third one that we did?
Compact settlement.
Was that that was the third one? Yeah, compact settlement. Because compact settlement is important for resilience, right? But like building compact settlements away from floodplains. And then it's also important for emissions reduction, because if we're all in small neighborhoods and we don't have to drive so much, that's good. So those were the three groups also that had some ideas that came out of this sort of cross-cutting issues. And I was really happy that health is being lifted up as an important thing too. So
What's the third one, Kelly? So compact settlement, public health, and what?
And I think the other one was education and workforce development.
Education.
Is that right? Am I right?
It's compact settlement, workforce, and education.
Oh, workforce. Okay, and then health was now
Is in
part of what they were-
RRA.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Got it. Yep.
Okay.
My 3-year-old's having a moment. I hope it wasn't too disruptive. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So the health thing is part of, and so that was also really cool, and like, yes, very important that's being lifted up. So I'm really pleased about that. We have some really good experts in that field too that are taking part in those conversations. Okay. All right. I'm definitely pushing us well past when we were supposed to be switching to our chapter development thing. And if Sam does come back in time and we can hear about what they're doing in cross-sector mitigation, that'd be great. But if not, I mean, my sense is they're sort of on the similar track of where they've been, just honing, like they're trying to hone in on like certain things that they are seeing as better opportunities at this point in time compared to 4 years ago. That's like.
I just want to note there's a question in the chat from Mona about
Have you heard
whether
anything about this? Because I haven't exactly. Yeah. Mona's question was, are there talks or concerns about cutting funds for climate action plans with the new administration? And Mona, were you talking about and we have some changes in Vermont, but are you thinking federally? The federal administration?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think in Vermont, we have some changeover in the legislature. We have a new lieutenant governor, but otherwise it's pretty much the same. But a lot of our funding has come from federal funds. So I haven't necessarily heard specific concerns. I think my sense is people are just not counting on any new funds coming in. I don't know if others have had anything.
Yeah, I think
Sophie, you said,
yeah. There's definitely concern. You asked Mona, are there concerns about federal funds getting cut related to climate action? Definitely concerned. So we're actively going to be keeping an eye on what that picture is. As things are known, I'd be happy to like share many updates or news articles on it. Yeah, I know that in Vermont, agencies have been really proactive and really working hard to obligate funds, federal funds. So for folks like me to whom that concept was like kind of new, once you have funding obligated where you say this is how it's going to be spent and that's planned for, then it's harder for that funding to get taken back. And what that means is that you have funds that haven't been obligated yet, those might be more at risk. So I know in Vermont, a lot of agencies have been working really hard to make sure that funds are as obligated as they can possibly be before the federal administration changes over.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie, and thanks for lifting that question up, because things had popped up and then I missed it. All right, so let's so we did already go through not as far behind as I thought. We went over the drafting timeline with Liz. So then we have this overall outline of our chapter, which we can walk through this real quick, and then let's try to keep it quick. And then folks who've worked on drafting have shared some things that we have in a more fleshed out document. So chapter outline. So with the opening context, Alex is working on that, has worked on that. Basically saying, what do we mean when we say equity? Oh, yeah. So here, actually, this is something, Alex, and I haven't had a chance to read in depth what you wrote, but we had somebody at the Climate Council meeting on Monday, and he works for I think it's the Public Service Department. He's the commissioner there, but he hasn't been involved in our work since he's new to that role, so he hasn't really been involved in our work and wasn't fully familiar with what we tend to mean on the Climate Council and our subcommittees when we say frontline and impacted communities. Because when he was thinking about flooding, the communities that are impacted are the ones, like he was thinking about like drawing a border around the flood area, right? That it's obvious they're all impacted. But he actually was like, oh, thank you, that's very helpful, when I sent him the definition about, no, it's not a geographical community, it's a group of people or groups of people. So that's something where I was like, oh my gosh, of course, again, we need to remember that not everyone is using language in the same way. So it was like a really great, and I said, thank you so much for asking, I always forget. So that is why I think this opening context thing is going to be really helpful, because not everybody's been doing this for as long, and we don't necessarily have aligned vocabulary, and we need to use words. We just need to all be somewhat aligned on what they mean. So, okay. And then, so why this work is important, getting some data, and then Claire's drafting the where we were, talking about the history, because she's been involved pretty much since we started. And then Carrie's just doing sort of like a reflection on the process, and then where we are now and what was different this time. Sophie's been working on that. I'm going to go through this quick because I think we have a lot of sections already drafted. Is that right, Sophie? Like
Yes, yeah.
More
that was shared.
I want to save time for that. Okay.
Yeah, that was shared
and then
on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And there's the link to the full actual draft.
Yeah, and I do have that up, so we can switch to that tab. Hallie's been working on the challenges and stumbling blocks. And then we're talking about doing call-out boxes for weeping. And is this something that Sam's had a chance to work on? I'm sorry, I've been a little bit out of things.
Not that Sam has shared with us, but
okay.
But if Sam comes back, they can speak to.
Yeah. So what we're like, this is just something about like helping to And I think this will also be part of what Sophie was talking about earlier about getting some stories in there, but we can also just do some like very nice plain language, succinct call out boxes. And Sophie, I don't know if the folks that you're working with for the stories and the graphic design, would they be helping with this kind of, with this also potentially?
Not with writing the call out boxes,
Mm-hmm.
but they would incorporate them into the design
The design.
and,
Okay.
and copy it.
Okay, great. Yeah, so the idea would be if there are specific things in the plan that we really think are key things that we want to highlight, or really complex things that we would like to try to summarize in plain language, they would come into, they'd be in these little call-out boxes, which would be like when you're going through a textbook and you're like glazing over, and then there's this little box and you go, oh, I'm going to read that. That's the call-out box. So that's what we were thinking about, and Sam has some good sort of design thinking also, so it was helping to work with that. And then okay, so then yeah, and then Matthew and Mona, you had also volunteered to help us with reviewing the plain language. So basically, so the idea is we want to have a good draft that we can share with the Climate Council by the end of, or sorry, but yeah, by the end of next month, so by March 1st. And we are already doing a good job, I think. So should I switch to the
Yeah, so I'm happy to jump in here for a quick second.
Yeah, please.
So
I'll stop
I
sharing
think what
unless-
we thought we could do for this section of the agenda, and so Kelly, you can tell us how much time you want to dedicate to this, but we have some of the drafters in the meeting, and we thought that we could put up the draft chapter and sort of talk through the sections, recognizing this is a first draft. There's been, varying amounts of time and effort put into the sections, and have the drafters or some representative, if they're not here, kind of speak to that, capture some comments or any suggestions that may come from other subcommittee members. And then the idea is that the chapter drafters are going to get together, either incorporate some of that feedback and find a time to meet prior to or following this meeting. And we have not set up another time for the drafters to get together. And then prior to our February meeting, which we're going to talk about what the date of that February meeting might be, if we may want to change our February meeting date, that's when Matthew and Mona, we were hoping that you may have the capacity to do some plain language review of a second draft that may be ready in early February. And then as Kelly and others have said, we'll bring those second drafts to our February meeting. And then we hope to have a final draft ready for Just Transition Subcommittee approval during our March 6th meeting that we can then share with the council at their March 10th meeting. So that's kind of the time frame and I think plan for today. So I haven't been watching the time maybe as closely, Kelly, as you have. So
it's 5 o'clock. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Abby. That's really helpful. I think that's perfect.
So yeah, we're gonna take public comment in 30 minutes. So that might be the time that we have.
And we can take a break for that if we need to. So yes. So let's see. Do we have...
Alex has the first section of the chapter, and it's great, Alex, to see you in person or on the screen. And I don't know, do you feel like you want to talk through kind of what you incorporated into this section of the chapter?
Yeah,
and again, folks can feel like you can share feedback or questions. We can go section by section.
Yeah, yes, please. I would love some feedback. I had a lot of time over my winter break, so I've got a lot of writing and it might seem like a lot, so I apologize. But yeah, I started, you see in the first part, I created an introduction. I made a very long one at first, but I realized I felt like the summarized introduction might be better. I didn't feel as if my long one was very representative of how we are right now, and other people have drafted parts about what we're doing right now, what the challenges were before. So I think that my shorter section will be better. I wrote like our 3-part strategy that was mentioned in the first one, and acknowledging that engagement needs to be continuous. The council has dedicated to collaborating with Vermonters. I did an equality versus equity section. I recognize that they're often confused and they have different important differences. I created 2 different definitions for them based off of what I got from you guys in the December meeting. So I created that, said that the approach that is more effective is highlighting the importance of focusing on equity, created who are Vermont's frontlines and impacted communities. I have a paragraph about our definition, also from resources that I received from all you lovely people. And then I have a list that, again, I got from resources. I'm not sure if there's a specific way that I need to arrange and add those. So yes, I had that. And then I had a section on youth as an impacted community. I think this is something that's very important for me specifically to bring some attention to. Of course, it's very important to focus on every impacted community, but my like youth members and I, we really wanted to kind of put this out there on the importance of engaging youth and how you can do that. So I wrote 2 paragraphs on that, and Sophie in the chat, she said that I could create it into a call out box. So I'm thinking that now I will definitely shorten that, and whatever the word count is, I really want to keep this in here, except as a little call out box. So understanding youth importance and how we should include them in climate action. Oh, I forgot. Up here, I did add a little section on how to define a just transition. I hope that is okay with everybody, just because, Kelly, like you were saying earlier, like not everybody uses the same terms and has the same definitions. And I remember when I came in and when I was learning about the committees, I was like, what is a just transition? So I think it's something that may be helpful for people reading this chapter. So that is what I've got. I'd love some comment from anybody who has had time to read through it. I think I'm gonna get rid of that lengthy introduction up there, and I really want to focus on a summarized introduction. So yeah.
Alex, thank you.
Just one thing. Do you have any illustrations? Because I just don't see any illustration of anything like you know, the segments that you were talking about, equity and equality, and and justice and stuff like this. There is some beautiful illustrations that you can actually, and this will reduce like when you are reading only like words, it sometimes it gets you tired, but when you see some visuals, it make it easy to understand and make it easier. So
Yeah.
if you can add some.
And I think we can
Yeah,
definitely.
I would love to add some.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was gonna say, then Mona, this is the very, very first draft, so.
Yeah.
But I think that would be a great endpoint to try to make sure we have illustrations.
Mm.
Yes,
Love the idea of
definitely.
the call
I
out
think
box.
illustration is
And
very
Alex,
important.
Alex, I think you might draft the way I do, where I write something and it's like, and then I'll have my husband come read it. He's like, well, this is a lot of words. Break it out. And so I like how you did it, and I like you left it because that's helpful. I wanted to ask if we scroll down. So the second part where that you have broken it down. What is a just transition, equality versus equity, and what are the frontline and impacted communities? I wanted to ask if folks think there's enough. Are there any other terms that we use a lot that we should? Is there anything missing? Did Alex get all of the ones that we really want to lift up? Do we need to add another summary of or another explanation of another term that we use a lot?
I remember when I was reading the first chapter, there was some mention on like the term of holding space. I'm not sure if that is something that I should write about, but it could be something that we could add depending on what everybody else thinks.
I
Hey,
wonder also, Alex, wanna, oh, go ahead, Mona, I'll get mine after.
no, you
Go
started first. I'm sorry. No, you please complete your thought. I will talk after you.
Okay, Alex, it would be cool also if you shared with the subcommittee what you and your youth members are planning to do with some glossary and definition terms that will complement these larger descriptions with some smaller definitions.
Yeah, I can do that. So my fellow youth members and I, we attended the Youth Climate Leaders Academy where we created something that we wanted to do to benefit climate action and our climate in general. We thought that it would be great to incorporate more youth into the climate action plan and into climate action in general. And we did this while I was delegated the idea of putting in youth as an impacted community into the CAP. But in general, like Sophie said, we are creating a glossary of terms that people use a lot in these committees and in the Climate Council when we're talking about climate action to define these not just for youth, but for adults as well. Because I remember when I joined this committee, I was very confused with a lot of the words and the terms, and I'm sure that other youth and even adults maybe. So we thought that this would be a great idea, and we are also planning on doing youth input sessions. Either we're going to begin with some online ones, and we're going to go and do some in-person ones, so we can get some youth insight on the CAP. So this is very much a draft. We're like in the beginning stages of this, but I'm really excited to create these youth input sessions and get this glossary of definitions. So if there are any definitions, I think I have most of them. I'm trying to think of more JTSC definitions. If anybody has any that come to mind, like you can drop them in the chat, please tell me that you think it's important for youth to know. Please let me know.
Carrie. Hi, Carrie. Welcome. I saw Carrie put moving at the speed of trust as one of the things that we talked about a lot, which I don't know that it necessarily means it's because it's in the just transitions guiding principles or guiding principles for just transition. I guess that document isn't being changed. This is sort of another like addition, and it's still part of the climate action plan. So that's not going away, but I do really think this is a great introduction, and we need this chapter to explain what's going on. And people may not go back and read the original full document. So there are definitions also in there for different types of equity and justice, like procedural and distributive, and those are helpful, but I think like from my sense, like, and I'll go back and look, but I feel like you hit the big ones that come up a lot and might be confusing and important to define, but we still have time to figure out if there's others. And then I love the glossary thing. That's where I would put like distributive equity, procedural equity, and there's a third one that I'm forgetting. And like those are great for a glossary. And so there's some of those in the hello baby. Sorry. Baby. Those are in the guiding principles for a just transition. And I think moving at the speed of trust was also something that's like not a term exactly, but a phrase that's important in equity work. So what a cool thing. And yeah, your counterpart who's on the council, I got to see her in the meeting on Monday. She's very well spoken. She did a great job representing the youth, and I'm glad you're all getting together and talking about these things together too. So any other
I
questions?
think Mona was gonna go next.
Oh yes, Mona. I am so sorry. I totally got wrapped up in. Go ahead, Mona, please.
I was just, like, I'm very thankful for what's your, I didn't get her name for the person who drafted this chapter. Thank you very much. Are you planning to put any quotes, from youth or from marginalized community, in between the sentence or to the side, in a box, or just some quotes, because it's going to be very, very effective.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I think that would be a great idea. Thank you for that. I can talk to youth in my community. I would love to get some quotes and ideas. So thank you for giving me that idea. I will start working on that and see what I can find.
And yeah, Sophie could probably help pull some from some of the community engagement activities. That would be really cool. What a good idea, Mona. Thank you. Thanks, Abby, for reminding me that Mona wanted to say something. Anything else before I think so? Claire is not. Oh, but Sophie, you helped. Did you help with the where we? Okay. Did you want to talk about this real quick, Sophie? It's not. I mean, it is quick. So.
I just what I couldn't do was the part that Claire said about like some data background. So I couldn't cover that for folks who Claire's been super busy with responding to like public comments on a report that she's been responsible for. She was so I helped with this little spot about where we were. Just really brief and succinct because I think the rest of it kind of covers other parts. But I think we'll still need Claire's help with some of the data. But maybe there's other people who also can or wanted to contribute to that part. I think Denise had said something. She's not here anymore. Yeah, so I don't know if there's that much to say about this tiny paragraph, except for if it's small and if there's anything missing, we can add it in.
I have one thing that comes to mind immediately, which would be that we engaged Kaya Morris to help the subcommittees use the guiding principles and the rubric to work through some of their key action, like some of their key actions, whatever they call them. Put those in your glossary too. What are they? Actions and
like strategies and pathways. Is that what they call?
Strategies, pathways, and actions. Yeah. That was what so that because people have said that no one ever used the guiding principles. I'm like, that's not true. We just probably could have done better. But yeah, so I could probably fill in some of the gaps there, and Jane might be able to also. Danielle.
And I'm not sure if this is elsewhere in this draft. I haven't had a chance to read it all, but is it mentioned that we are liaisons to the other subcommittees, and would that be worth adding in here too, of things that we do on an ongoing basis?
Good call.
Yeah.
Because we had liaisons the first time around also.
Okay, great. That's why I was a really bad person to draft that paragraph because I wasn't there. So
yeah,
thanks for
Danielle was.
So maybe Kelly and Danielle, I could send you. You could add in those little things because I think you'll be able to speak to both of those better than I'd be able to.
Yeah. Some of us have been around a while. Mona, Danielle, Abby. I mean, and Jane also could probably fill in blanks, but I know she's a busy person. I mean, we all are, but some of us have infants. Danielle, she's so beautiful.
Thank you.
No, that Kaya helped with the actually like engaged as a contractor with the different subcommittees on some of their key actions, and with their key proposals, and yes, that we had liaisons to the subcommittees throughout the initial climate action plan development. I think those are big ones. Anybody else? Mona, Abby, over here, involved for a long time on this subcommittee? Actually, I don't remember. Mona, yeah, you, when did you join, Mona? You've been here for a long time.
Maybe 2021, I think.
Okay, yeah,
Mm.
a long time before
Yeah.
we adopted this final thing.
Yeah.
All right, so Carrie, and Carrie's been around a long time too. Are you still here?
Oh yeah, I'm here. Yes, so this section, I just tried to write about what was in the notes. And then sort of when I was finished, I was like, this doesn't really seem like much of a reflection. It's more like the shortcomings. So, I think if we wanted to have a real reflection, that might be, we might have that information someplace else from one of the activities that we did. But like following the outline, it, didn't necessarily seem like a reflection. And then at the end, I put in these bullets because I just thought like maybe we should say what we learned and apply to the future. And then I realized that Sophie wrote about that because that was the name of her whole section. So I think there's a lot of overlap between those bullets and what Sophie did because it's repetitive. We had a lot of the same ideas.
Oh, we'll combine them and it'll be better than ever. Like Captain Planet. With our powers combined. Yeah, I mean, anyone else want to weigh in? But it sounds like this is sort of where we need to just say, yeah, why don't you two put your heads together, or somebody else takes your two drafts and combines them into the Captain Planet draft of what we want for this or something.
Yeah, I'd be happy to consolidate, because it sounds like, Carrie, you might want to do something around a more reflective. Is that an adjective?
Reflective? No, that's different.
Well, I think we had a lot of conversations, right, where we talked about stuff and how it made us feel. And like maybe this isn't the right place for that, but
I think it's important to highlight some of this, though, that there wasn't enough time and that the limited public engagement, because it really shaped what we did moving forward also. So even though maybe it's less of a reflection, I do think that the material should stay somewhere.
yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I haven't read through, I'll admit, all the detailed sections either, but I'm not convinced that shortcomings makes for a poor reflection. I actually think that can be a helpful way to help then guide the next plan. I do recognize that it's, precedes the section that Sophie wrote on where we are now. But I think we had intended to almost like show the progression, that like we could have reflection, that like more public engagement was needed earlier in the process, more time was a challenge, training for counselors and subcommittee members was kind of lacking in the first round, and then the where we are now sort of show that there was hopefully some progress in some of those areas, that like we built in response to some of those shortcomings, so that the plan iterations get better and better. Not that this plan is going to be perfect, because I think there's still questions around time and language and community engagement, of course, but Yeah, I think, yeah, we could review it for redundant or for redundancy, but I kind of still like the concept of them being two separate, building upon one another sections. Having said that without having read it yet, but
No, I agree. And I'm wondering, a couple different thoughts popped in my head, but I'm wondering now after what you said, Abby, if we basically made them mirror each other and have like these were the things that happened last time, and they can be good and bad, but a lot of them were the struggles that we had based on different things, and then what we've done differently this time, and have them kind of mirror each other and have it show the progress by like having your bullets in the same order or something, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know exactly how that would be displayed, but I think that might be compelling to give a little bit of maybe like a paragraph and then some bullets, and then now what we've done this time, and it would be a paragraph, and then the bullets would coincide with the ones above, and so maybe
Yeah.
numbering them with, or like or giving them like a bolded title of like timing.
I was gonna say what Mona just said, if you can put it in a table where you have like what happened last time, what happened this time. So they're like side by side.
Right. Do it side by side. Yeah. Yeah. Something like that. I think you two could like figure, and I'd be, and then this, like, I know I'm not super available all the time and I'm busy, but I feel like I have some like historic knowledge that I might be able to lend to this, that I would be willing to like schedule a meeting and try to hash this out, if that would be helpful. Get me on your calendar. So I think that would be a cool way to do it.
And I ask one question. I haven't read it yet, but did you added a section about youth? Did you add anything about marginalized community, or the most affected by the climate change, or there is no anything mentioned about us?
So there, in the section that Alex drafted, there was a lot of talk about all different kinds of marginalized communities, and I do wonder, like, if we have, because the youth thing, which is just obviously very important, and personal to Alex, will be some sort of little call out box. And I do wonder if that's something, if there are other people on our subcommittee who want to really speak to their experience from their perspective of whatever, frontline and impacted community that they're a part of, if they wanted to also, like, I think that would be a totally appropriate thing to have a few different call out boxes with some stories. It's really powerful. I mean, Mona, when you came to speak to the Climate Council and shared your experience of, damage from storms and things, it's really powerful to hear those stories, and I want them. That's why I've been like, I want them woven into this. I want them to be heard. I want people to understand. So, if this is an appropriate place to put it, and this would be a good spot, I think a couple different stories in this chapter would be a great thing. If no one's going to say no, I would totally push for that. And I would love to hear from Mona, especially because you spoke so well at our Climate Council meeting, and anyone else. I mean, honestly, not Mona especially, but you did a great job sharing your story. So so I would love to meet with you, Sophie and Carrie, to talk about merging those two or aligning those in a table or whatever visually understandable format, and filling in gaps on those two sections. And dredging up all of my memory of history. So this is your section. So Sophie, is there anything you want to talk about here, or should we say we've we're gonna revisit this and probably reformat this and Carrie's section and combine them. Are we good with that? Because I do
There's
want,
two
I know
things
we have
to
public
say.
comment.
Oh,
Go ahead.
yeah, I can fit this in before public comment. Two things to say. One, the conversation just now reminded me, maybe something to say explicitly that could have happened differently this time. Is that we wanted to do more training with the council in collaboration with the Office of Racial Equity. And just, I think, capacity constraints. They're a very small shop juggling a lot of things, weren't able to get that set up. And that makes me think maybe there is a little bit more that we fill in. It might need to come at kind of later, but maybe there's kind of a space held for like also what needs, like, based on this round, what could be improved for next time. I think like Callie, what Callie writes kind of covers that. So maybe it's not necessary, but I don't know, something to think about if there's any kind of reflection that we can do in like May or June, after the council's done their work. The other thing that I wanted to note here that's in the highlight part down there, how have other subcommittees utilize the community engagement reports? I couldn't fill that in myself. I could do some work myself to reach out to the co-chairs and get their input, or if liaisons like have that knowledge and want to write a couple sentences, that could be another way to approach it. So I'm happy to help out with getting that information, but I didn't have it at my fingertips to put it in there, so it's flagged as another thing to fill in.
I feel like I could ask that of my liaison subcommittee. So ag and ecosystem, I don't know the answer, honestly, but I feel like that's an appropriate kind of liaison role that I'm willing to take on. I don't know that others may have the same capacity, but I can certainly ask.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I'm I don't know if folks had a chance to look at the public engagement plan that the council as a whole is adopting. It's very similar to what the subcommittee has adopted, based in large part on some of our recommendations. I'm optimistic that it's going to be a really good guidance for the work of the council going forward. We're going to have a lot more public comment. The subcommittees were like, I don't know, people haven't really been coming to comment. So we didn't get much feedback on a lot of what they were doing, or like what their experience was, because they didn't get a bunch of comment, but it'll come in fast and furious now, as we get to the big decisions and things. On the subject of public comment, whose screen am I seeing? Whoever's sharing, yeah, thank you. Don't know that we have any members of the public, but if there are any members of the public who wanted to share something, this would be the time. I'm gonna go with, I'm pretty sure we don't have members of the public. If anyone pops in the next little while, we'll certainly give you the airwaves. There was one more section, which was Callie's section. I didn't know if we wanted to go over it real quick. It looked like the challenges and stumbling block section we had in here. And that was where we were thinking those also maybe overlapped, right? With some of the things. Sophie, you were saying some of those overlapped with what you were thinking.
Oh, I don't think there's overlap with like the existing draft.
Okay.
But just saying, Callie's kind of covered so far what some of the challenges were this round. And I'm gonna kind of revise what I was babbling about before to say, like, if there's there might be something to add to this section once we get to May and the council has done, the public engagement will have happened in April,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What do you guys think about, again, those that maybe are most familiar, like, could this be a third section to the table that Mona was suggesting of like where we were, where we are now, and then like challenges and stumbling blocks that we're still kind of experiencing, or is it more helpful to capture what Callie has here in a narrative form? Maybe it makes sense to capture, I'm just thinking out loud, but maybe it makes sense to have the chart and then capture challenges and recommendations as like something that someone would read as takeaways from kind of like the juxtaposition of 5 years later experience. So I think as I say it out loud, I think I actually like it in the narrative following the table.
And I think if we're in a drafting session and looking at the different things and seeing if we can fit things together in a table, some of these may fit in a third column or something, but also some may not. And I think I also appreciate some little narrative pieces. I think that's helpful.
Yeah.
One thought I had, and I was trying to figure out if this would be a good way to, if this would make sense, be appropriate or helpful, but having for the like what happened last time, having a couple of first person quotes, but having them be sort of anonymous of like how we felt about it. I think that was sort of where maybe you were going, Carrie, was like how we felt after that experience. But having quotes rather than one person saying how we felt, because that's not something we could say. But I also don't know for sure if that's necessarily helpful or appropriate to have in here. That was just a thought that popped in my head. And it was sort of along the lines of, having the stories of what happened and how people were. I mean, I can tell you guys that after the insane year and a half or whatever it was of going through all of this, we started in October of 2020 and we finished it in December of 2021. And in the middle of that, in April, I had my second child and it was grueling. And when we finally approved the climate action plan, I went off the meeting and I just had to go in another room and I cried. It was just it was so much. It was so much work and it was such a big lift. And that was my experience of it. It was just, we did it. It wasn't perfect. No, but we did it. Then we got this thing. There was a huge lift and it was so stressful. And then now, here we are. I feel so much more, I feel like we're so much more on top of things. We have an amazing public engagement team that are doing such a good job and we're hearing from people. And we have Sophie on the climate action office. We didn't even have a climate action office when we started. So I think there's some of that I just kind of want to give my gratitude to all of the amazing people that have come along and helped make this experience better. So I don't know, maybe I'll just put that in my cyanide comments or whatever they call it at the end of the climate action plan. But I think we're doing a really good job now, and obviously we can always do better, always, everyone. But I'm really proud of what we're doing and hope that we can keep making this better going forward. So I think we just had a couple. Do we have any other comments on this? So I think our next steps on this drafting, it sounds like we're going to look to see if we can consolidate those two sections, maybe another one, Callie, parts of it into some sort of table. Let's invite Callie to that. So let's see if we can get Carrie, Sophie, me, and Callie, and if there's anyone else who really wants to come and talk about those sections. Abby, I don't know, been with us a long time. Because I think what I would try to blend to it would be some of the history stuff. and happy to also help with organizing thoughts into a table.
I'm more than happy to join kind of like a drafting session. Like I feel like there might be, I think the drafters need to contemplate whether there's some work that happens between now, bless you, and a meeting. And then some work that happens after the meeting before we, as a subcommittee, meet again in February.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's where we are, unless there are other comments before we move on to like the next steps part.
I just had another comment about that last section there, something to add, like not only the time commitment, but the fact that most other subcommittees meet during the day. It's been super challenging for volunteers who work and maybe not work in a job that would allow them to join a meeting. So that was one of the challenges I personally experienced early on as a liaison, not being able to be a liaison at all because I wasn't able to attend any daytime meetings. So just another little blurb at the end there where we talk about, yes, the per diem, sorry, the per diem, but also the time being during the day.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. Any other thoughts before we talk about our next steps? Sorry, I love seeing babies. Mine aren't babies anymore. Yeah, so for that idea of combining those chapters, I'm happy to jump on a meeting just to keeping it smaller than quorum. Happy to jump on a meeting with like Abby, Sophie, Carrie, Callie, maybe, and then see about those last 3 sections, how we want to combine and reshuffle those. And I can fill in some gaps. And maybe last 4, like maybe it's 4, I lost track. And then maybe a one after that with all of the drafters meeting again. Does that make sense? And then coming up with a more, distinct draft. It still probably won't have like pictures or anything, but we can draft the idea of like doing call out boxes and just say like this will be more visually appealing in the final one, and just get that at least sort of formatted how we think it will look, and then come back, and then the next meeting would normally be
scheduled for the 6th. I think the question is based on timing. Would it be more, which is only 3 weeks away because we moved this meeting, I guess. Or I don't know which meeting moved, but anyway, would we want to move the February meeting to be February 13th instead of February 6th? I don't know if that second Thursday would work. And then the March meeting is still scheduled to be March 6th.
Do folks have their calendars up? Is that? And I don't know. There's the big climate council meeting that's hopefully in person in March is on the 10th. Is that right? Is that they went in person one?
That's correct.
Liz? Okay.
Yep.
So like I'll have a busy week, but I'm happy to do another meeting that Thursday, or if we thought it would make more sense for our drafting to have more time and meet on February, sorry. Oh no, sorry. I'm looking at the wrong one. Sorry. February 6th. Meet on February 20th and then March 6th. Is that too late? Oh yeah.
We didn't feel like February 20th would work because of school vacation. So I think that the question is whether the February 6th meeting should be moved to February 13th.
Okay, sorry.
Which would give us one more week, excuse me, for the drafters to work on the draft. Because the idea would be to bring a solid second draft of the plan and time for Mona and Matthew to do plain language review, at least a first review by the February meeting.
I think that's a good timing for me. I didn't realize the 20th was already into some people's Feb breaks. So yes, I think February 13th is good for me. Anybody have objections or thoughts otherwise? For folks. I mean, and that does give us like a nice 4 weeks from now. So I think that will be a good amount of time.
Yeah.
Great.
Do you feel like you can just update that in the calendar invite? Do folks feel like I should send an email to let everyone know that we're going to bump it a week?
That seems like a good idea, and I can update that easily.
I can do that.
And Matthew's got his hand up.
Yes, this is Matthew. Yes, I think, having that, I'm free that day, but I think a calendar invite would be more appropriate for the accessibility and accommodations that most of us are going to be made aware of. We want to have a quorum, but if we don't have that calendar invite, or any type of notification, that's the biggest problem is, if we don't get notified, we can't join. So, I think that's just a basic accommodation. I meant to send that out,
Definitely.
to remind everybody to, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'll update that calendar invitation, Matthew, so you'll get that in your inbox. I'll do that tonight, so you should see it change from the 6th to the 13th on the calendar invitation, and then I'll also update that on the climate change website.
Thank you, Sophia. It's just, it's just, you want everybody to be there and you want a quorum. And if they don't know that it's happening, things get, can get complicated and, very quickly. The communication can get complicated than it should be. Thank you.
And Alex is asking, when would the second drafts be due? So the idea is that they would be due prior to this meeting, which we've now said is the 13th. So I think we get to set the date. I mean, could it be that Monday, the 10th? That would then, Sophie could send out like she did last time, which was really helpful. That would give all of us as subcommittee members a few days to review a second draft. It would also, or maybe it needs to be earlier than that if we want Mona and Matthew to be able to do plain language review. I guess that's a big question that so Matthew and Mona, it might be about your availability of, when you would want to do that plain language review.
To me, it's like whenever you guys get done drafting that, or whenever Sophia sends me that document to review, I want to make sure that, like I said, I'm very accommodating. It's just, when do you want this? I know we want this to buy that that Thursday, the following Thursday, have those two, but like I said, a week before or once you get it done, but with whatever the drafts of documents, I mean, a week before will give us plenty. For me, it'll give me plenty of time to go through that, and then I'll be all set for the following when we meet next Thursday. So that will be my take. So give us some time to look over that, to make sure that plain language, is in there, and it sounds good. I'm not like a wordsmith guy. That if it has to not just look good, but has to sound complete. And like I said, if it's jargony or it doesn't sound right, other individuals are going to pick up notice, especially our legislators. They're going to pick up and say, "What's this? It doesn't sound right. Sound incomplete." That's what we're trying to do, is trying to make sure it sounds, the first time correct the first time. Thank you.
It's just the same for me, So whenever it is ready, send it to me. It's not going to take long from me.
So Mona and Matthew, I'm gonna ask, would you prefer Friday, February 7th or Monday, February 10th? Does the weekend make a difference to you?
Fridays will be better. The weekend will give me good time, yeah.
Yeah.
But also whenever it's available.
Yeah. I think that feels reasonable that we could have a second draft with incorporated edits and a new format submitted by February 7th so that it could be turned around, put into a final version that could be shared, Mona and Matthew, with you for plain language review, that then you would turn around and share with us by February 13th, which is then that's not time, that doesn't provide time for the subcommittee members to do have a lot of time to read and review. But I think it's probably the time that's needed for drafting and plain language review. So maybe we can do a session similar to this at our February meeting where we go through chapter by chapter or section by section, and then we do a final kind of edit and read through before the March 6th meeting.
Yes, this is Matthew, Abby. I mean, yeah, I like that idea, but I do like the Friday. Me and Mona can do Friday,
Yeah.
to review. like I said, the February 3rd, like I said, we'll do our usual meeting of February 13th or the week, like I said, and then we'll be able to, like you said, then we can read all through that, like I said, chapter by chapter, make sure it's, what's not just sound, good, but make sure it, it's readable, word for word. It sounds, not only just sounds, but looks good. And yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So Sophie dropped something in the chat about maybe just booking a certain amount of time in our rethinking the February meeting, like booking some time in February to read it, and then maybe again in March to read over the draft so that we don't need to. Obviously, if people are able to take it on ahead of time, great, but having a certain amount of reading time booked into the meeting, I think is totally feasible. If these are our two main, like our main things are get this chapter ready, maybe quick updates, get the chapter read, talk about it, say what edits we want, do the edits between February 13th and March 6th, and then on March 6th also book in some reading time. That might, and I mean, if we can do a little time before to read and make comments, obviously that's great.
Yeah.
But hopefully that will help us all be able to contribute and not need to set aside a huge amount of time outside of meetings to review and read. And
I love the idea of it being a section by section review that begins with some reading time and then some kind of feedback and edit suggestions time. And I think we can spend majority of the meeting hopefully in that way.
That'd be
That's
great. And I'm thinking, I don't know if this, sorry, I had to jump for a second there, but I think probably like the visual elements, pictures, layout, all of that will come later. So I'm wondering, I'm guessing that would have to come later, but maybe we could have some placeholder things or like insert picture, insert an icon here. Just some little things to say, this is coming. It's not here yet, but we're going to have a contractor who will help with that. Does that seem like the right way to go? Does that make sense? Sophie's got a thumbs up.
Yeah,
Okay.
like, yeah, if you have ideas of like illustration here of like what that illustration might be of or about, that's super helpful guidance, and we can try and find the right image to fit that, or see if our contractors have some illustration experience, so there might be the ability to like create an illustration that never existed before, potentially.
Cool. And also, I think we can do like the really basic layout of like a call out box is like a thing. You can say, I want to do that in Word. So we could do just really basic. It won't be as polished, hopefully. Well, maybe we're going to do a perfect job right off the bat, but won't be as polished maybe as the final one, but give us the idea as we're reading through it about what our vision is. And then somebody can come in and help make it prettier for the final version.
There are two questions. One, I know this, I should know this by now. Can I send an email to the whole subcommittee that includes the date change and kind of like this updated timeline? We just can't meet. Okay. So I'm going to send kind of like all these instructions, I think, as part of the meeting change to February 13th, just so we're letting everyone know who's not here, kind of like what the process is. And what made me think of that is my second question, which is Sam's role in call out boxes. Do we want to ask Sam to do the same type of review at the same time that plain language is happening, or have Sam be working on the second draft same time that the drafters are working? I haven't thought that through.
Well, and I think Sam also was going to help with call out boxes maybe in other chapters of the climate action plan. I think that was what her thought was also and her offer. But because I mean, Sam was so great with helping with our visuals and things on that timeline of where we are and where we're going with the climate action plan and how to weave equity into each step and having ideas about like, well, why don't you make these two bubbles one bubble? So I think she's just got some good visual ideas, and then I think that was sort of where that assignment got landed on her. I don't know. Anybody else have had more information that I don't have?
I don't have more information from Sam's perspective, but a timeline consideration is that there's probably not the same like deadline around those. So if we wanted to space that out, maybe that's the focus of the March meeting. Maybe that kind of gets staggered.
I think that's something we could do, like if they're call out boxes that are based on other chapters, I think that's something that maybe we could do once we see all of the draft chapters in March. So maybe in like our April meeting, we can comb through some of the things and see, oh, what are things that we could help pull out and bring into plain language in the final version. Of course, we wouldn't be able to necessarily do that until we had some public comment, but we could at least get some sense of where, which topic areas might warrant a call out box. I think that was the idea, is that Sam was going to help with not our chapter call out boxes, but I mean, maybe also that, but like all the other chapters. Which is something we offered to help with, by the way, for the other members of the Climate Council and the subcommittees.
So I want to use that maybe as a quick segue. We only have a few minutes left. Is everyone feeling relatively clear? I'll clarify, I think, in a narrative form, but like feel relatively clear, confident about the timeline for the chapter. Great. So one of the things that we had talked about as a next step was how could we, as a Just Transition subcommittee member, especially if you're not a drafter, let's say, assist other subcommittees. And one thing that we had talked about was liaisons reviewing language of plan recommendations of other subcommittees. And so I think that's just something that those of us in that role can offer, or the Climate Action Office can kind of remind other subcommittees when you have connection to them that we're available to do that. Does that seem reasonable?
I'm sorry, Abby, that's for plain language review of other chapters.
I'm not even sure if it's plain language review, but just would include plain language, but just like general review of dated, revised recommendations. Like if,
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that makes a lot of sense. I was gonna encourage sort of not spending too much time on the plain language review because the contractor will help us with that and just want to be sensitive to everybody's capacity, but reviewing with a content lens for equity, I think makes a lot of sense.
And also, encouraging the other subcommittees as I think right now they're sort of deep in it, but as they're grappling, as they get feedback after the March 1st, or after, I guess, April 1st, when the things go back out for public comment, if people are grappling with public comment and they're not sure how to deal with equity concerns or whatever, keeping that open invitation for them to come to our committee and have us be able to help them if they're sort of like, I don't know, is this something I need to really worry about? Like what's going on, and trying to figure out if how they can help restructure things if they're hearing a lot of concerns from the public. Just being able to be another set of eyes, another set of ears to help them if they're struggling with equity concerns or they're hearing a lot of negative feedback or something like that. Keeping that invitation. And basically the way that would be is if they wanted to come to our meeting, we could either hold an open house, but usually it would be reach out to the co-chairs, Abby and me, and say, I want to come to the meeting with our conundrum, and then we'll set it up and we'll make sure that they get the agenda. So that's an ongoing invitation, but I'm foreseeing that would be something that would happen after we get a little bit more public comment coming in starting in April. So it is 6 o'clock. Do we cover everything, Abby? Are we good?
yeah, I think maybe the next meeting we can build in a little time to talk about some additional just transition guidance materials for the council members, and this kind of commitment that we made around doing some more kind of equity inclusion training for subcommittee chairs and climate council members. So there are some interesting state of Vermont trainings that I've just recently become aware of by the Office of Racial Equity, and I sent an email to Sophie and a few others to say maybe these trainings could be offered to subcommittee chairs and council members, because I think as like partner of the Vermont kind of group, you all have access to the same trainings that we do as state employees, and those are, again, DEI trainings offered by Office of Racial Equity on February 26th and March 5th. So we will meet in February before those two trainings happen. So I'm thinking maybe we can just talk about that then, or Liz and Sophie and I can talk about it before then and maybe put some information out. But those are the only other things.
Oh, and I was thinking a similar thing, which would be that after the sort of April, after the big meeting in March, or maybe we have two, but after like our big meetings where we get our draft ready and send it out to the public, that would be a time where there's a bit of a breather, and that might be a good time for counselors to re-engage in that equity education piece. So maybe in April that would, but I don't know if there's a training then, but that was the thought I had also, Abby.
Great.
Like possibly good timing where people have a little bit more breathing room.
And then Matthew, I just wanted to honor, I know we're past time, that you had sent the email, and Kelly made reference to it, of not requiring council meetings to all be in person to capture kind of folks that have a great distance to travel and are hoping for hybrid options. So I think we touched on it briefly, but I also just wanted to reference it more formally.
Yes.
That I think
Yeah.
we heard that and appreciate that perspective.
Yeah.
Yes, Matthew, thank you. It's just, it's gonna come because the government, and it's just not from what I'm seeing, and it's true, across the state of Vermont. Even the government, there's just a demographic. We got senior citizens. Most of the legislators are just as elderly too as well. Let's be honest. They don't. Everybody gets old across the state of Vermont, and if we can't live up to the demographics of the state of Vermont, then what are we doing? And that's where I say bring an equity lens into this. Make sure people get compensated. Let's be honest. I'm not going to go off in a tangent right here, but volunteerism is overrated because it's being used to do the opposite to constituents across Vermont. It's like, you know what? Let's save Vermont's money, but let's do everything free and not pay them for their time. And that just makes it worse, throughout our committees and and our councils. It just, everybody deserves to be compensated for the time they put into this, And to me, that's where the equity comes in. I say we can't have that if you're not gonna, go forward and compensate people for their time. It's just, this state of Vermont can't just do things by free, They have to compensate people for their time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Yeah, I was really glad that you brought that up. And so for the record, as far as I understand, there are two things at play here. One is that most public meetings need to have a public location, in-person location that you can go to as a member of the public or a member of that body. And two, for the Climate Council going forward, these are our plans going forward. If there is an in-person meeting, that just means we encourage people to be there in person if they are able. If not, there will always be a hybrid option where you can join. So that is my understanding for at least how the Climate Council is going to operate in our meetings. And actually, I don't know, like, do our subcommittee meetings have to have a public location? Like, Liz, are you somewhere where someone could just like hop down next to you? And
The subcommittees do not need to have a public location.
Okay.
Just the council. Yep.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I had realized, I was like, you're not in a conference room.
I'm not in
cool.
a conference room.
Yeah, I wasn't sure because that's like a new nuance that is like a new old one. I think that was a thing for a while and then it wasn't, and now it is again.
Yeah, I'm sure there was lots of changes with the virtual, all the
I know.
things. Yeah.
But no, our plan for Climate Council and all related things, as far as I know, is that there will always be a hybrid option unless for some reason that's banned, which seems unlikely given how much we do hybrid. So wonderful. Thank you all for being here. And if there are any last things before we sign off, I think everyone.
This is Matthew. Again, thank you very much for standing up for that component. It's just under the ADA, American with Disability Act, it requires in public, no matter what it is, requires those type of options. And like I said, thank you guys for bringing that requirement to full light. It's just most of the state wants to see everything else, wants everything in person, but it's gonna backfire on them literally because that ADA requirement says it has to be. You gotta make some accommodations. If you don't, you will get sued on this, and that's what I'm trying to say is under the American with Disability Act, just follow the requirement. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Matthew. And also, not to mention the fact that driving all over the state is not really helping with our emissions reduction, right? So thank you, everybody. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you all in about a month, or if not sooner.
Thank you. Good. Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye.